inappropriate, or it's probably much more common. If it were all water, well, that's okay, but clearly, as my mother used to say, moderation in all things, I suppose, but you need lots of water. She also used to say moderation in all things, including moderation, which was a particularly good move. But it's clear from the point of view of public health that there are issues about how much fresh water we drink, or how much fluid we take, if it's the right sort without too many other things in it. And that then, of course, is the question. First of all, there's a practical question of how do you make it easy for people to drink water, and it is one of the things Northumbrian Water is setting about. So, for example, in schools, replacing fizzy drink machines with mains chilled, cooled water is something that we're very keen on. In workplaces, we're working with local authorities and trade unions to help put into workplaces, again, mains-fed water, not big bottles that are transported around because their energy cost is pretty high, but mains-fed water cooled in the workplace, and not in the toilet area, please, we always say, but in somewhere where people can basically enjoy the water. Care homes, we've done some interesting experimentation in care homes, putting in similarly fresh water, which apparently pays for itself in replacing laxatives in next to no time. The care homes all tell us, hospitals and so on. So getting fresh water to people is not something the UK is finding difficult. The key question, of course, and one that people will always want to debate, is what is pure water? What is the water that we're talking about? Water easily attracts and accommodates other chemicals. How should we as a country decide? Well, we've decided that we'll decide through the Drinking Water Inspectorate in the UK, and there's an independent body. It's not the water company that decides what should be in the water and at what levels those things should be in. We're under a pretty rigorous regime of inspection by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. They're a vital part of a regulatory system that was developed in the UK in 1990 when the water industry was privatised. And it's their conclusions that we as a water industry must follow. It's their targets that we must meet. They report on how well we do, but they're only one part of a jigsaw of regulation that the industry has. We have economic regulators, Ofwat, telling us how much we can charge, and we have quality regulators, not just the DWI people, but also the Environment Agency, Health Protection Agency, Food Standards Agency, all of whom are setting out guidelines about what needs to be done. The consumers' views, the customers' views are represented by the Consumer Council for Water in those debates, and by the opportunities provided by surveys, and government has a coordinating role to make sure the whole system is effective and is delivering water efficiently. So there are good substances in water, most people would accept that. There are also bad substances in water, sort of thing that DWI tell us shouldn't be there, or if they are there, should be there at very, very small concentrations, and that's what they measure. Some of the bad substances are in the eyes of the beholder, so much discoloured water, which people hate, and which we're working very hard to totally eliminate, is actually quite safe to drink, but that isn't something that people like to see. It's not something they're used to, and they don't want it. The DWI has an extensive research programme, and it's continually looking for new threats, and new threats are always there by way of pesticides that can get into the water sources, pharmaceuticals which find their way into water sources. There are new threats emerging all the while, which have got to be a continual source of research and development. Their 5-year plan tells you how they think it'll happen and how they think they'll research in the future what needs to be done. And there are controversial substances which could be added to water, but which people may not wish to have in their water. Fluoride is the best example of a controversial subject in the UK. It's the subject of a long-running debate. It's been used in many places in the UK for quite a long time now, so there should be a good evidence base about whether or not fluoride is net beneficial, and if there are risks, what those risks are. Clearly there are thought to be benefits in terms of people's dental health, and there are other people who claim that there are serious negative effects. It's not a water company that decides whether fluoride goes in the water in the UK, it's a water company that puts it in, but the decisions are taken by local health authorities who tell the water company what to do and the water company does it if it can. Clearly, as with so many things, there are practical issues like the boundaries aren't coterminous. So, where we can deliver water and where health authority boundaries are might be different, and that's just a very interesting practical problem in what can be done and how it can be delivered. There's clearly an issue in all of that about the public acceptability of and the public trust in the research base and the decisions that are made by government, by agencies, and that's a fascinating subject which I'm sure we can talk about. The accusation of mass medication is one which will never quite go away if people want that to be how they look at fluoridization, for example. And you can get too much water. Too much water can be a bad thing. There are occasional reports of people dying because they drank too much water. Usually I have to say in a water drinking competition, which happens from time to time, where people are made to drink huge amounts of water in very short times. But it is possible to get water intoxication, and it's dangerous if you do it. And of course, much more likely is that we get too much water in the wrong place. We get flooding, which is itself a public health issue for us. In the northeast here, for example, we have serious issues about sewer flooding, which is an awful thing and very dangerous from a public health point of view, potentially, and something that we're working very hard to invest to try and make sure that it doesn't happen, but it's another serious issue. Caused to some extent by the way we've allowed so much land to be concreted over, so much land that used to be permeable is no longer permeable, and drains which could cope in combination with permeable land can't cope when in fact all of the water is pushed into a drainage system. So there are serious issues there which the industry has to face. Our development plans are still influenced, as they have been all the way through this history, by population forecasts, by what's happening. We're faced now with uncertain forecasts about the climate, the rainfall, disruption between the seasons, the particularly prolonged risks of drought that we see. And lest any of you think that Northumbrian water, because of Kielder and all the water we have here, is free from any worries about the volume of water that we have around. In fact, we also do Essex and Suffolk water. That's part of the Northumbrian water group. And Essex has a drier climate than Jerusalem, for example. It's one of the statistics that the company always throws out. So working out in a growing population, which is what Essex has got, and with the London Gateway, part of which will serve a growing population around there, then we have issues about supply and demand of water in that part of the country and how that's going to be met and what's the most efficient and effective way to meet it. And over the last 15 years there's been the development of an extension of a reservoir serving Essex, which is designed to solve those issues for a long time. It's possible that moving water around could be an interesting way of sorting that, but capturing it and storing it locally is still important. A national grid for water has been mentioned frequently as a way to solve these potential issues that might affect health if people are short of water. It's always been rejected on cost grounds, and increasingly these days people are looking at not just the costs, the economic costs, the pounds to be spent to solve a problem like that. They're looking at the carbon cost of solutions of that, because water is heavy. It's heavy stuff. It takes a lot of pumping around to get it from one place to another. A lot of people who don't think much about saving water because it comes out of the tap and it's free, or at least it doesn't cost them any more if they're not metered for the extra bits, are suddenly starting to realise actually there's a very high carbon cost of getting the water to them, of making water move around the system. So the water companies, the water sector uses a lot of energy, and addressing the UK's carbon footprint is something that requires the water companies to be seriously involved in that, and we are, through anaerobic digestion, through the production of hydroelectricity. There are ways in which the water industry is doing a great deal to try and cut its energy and also to develop much more renewable sources. There's one question which underpins all of this, which is a really difficult question, and it's an interesting one in relation to what the Institute finds crops up in other places, and that is how do